Oh, it's great to be here. It's always great to be here at Stanford. Uh, it's great to see so many new and old friends, and it's really uh, it's particularly great to be reading with. Can you hear all right? To be reading with Francisco and Jose tonight. Stroke of genius, really. Jose is one of the most influential poets for me. Anytime anybody would ever ask me, who is your favorite Chicano poet, I would always immediately say Jose Montoya. I think the worst reading I ever gave was in Menlo Park, the first time I met and read with Jose, a gathering that Jose Antonio Burciaga, another Stanford, we'll call him a fellow, had organized in Menlo Park. Nobody came, Chicano poetry reading in Menlo Park. And I was so nervous. To this day, it was the worst reading I'd ever given. And I don't think I had this poem yet. I think I was working on this poem. I hadn't been to Mexico yet, which is where I started or finished the poem on the train on the way up. But I'll read this poem in honor of Jose. One of the poems that was very influential to me was one about his mother making tortillas at 4 a.m. Oh, that woman, she never sleeps, and the cluck, 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 cluck of the tortillas. Cluck, 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 yeah. The TL, oh, I remember her. But anyway, I felt like these poems and these poets, besides Jose Montoya, Lalo Delgado, Ali Rista, Ricardo Sanchez, and others, really created the road that I put my little poetic car on. And so it made me think about mothers, my mother and my mother's mother, and the mothers that were around me, single mothers in San Jose, California, who somehow their story was not being told. And I felt it was my duty to document my personal history, that somehow I could go so far inside the personal that I would come out somehow on the other side, the universal. So not long after that reading, I finished this poem, Beneath the Shadow of the Freeway. Across the street, the freeway, blind worm, wrapping the valley up from Los Altos to Sal Si Puedes. I watched it from my porch, unwinding. Every day at dusk, as Grandma watered geraniums, the shadow of the freeway lengthened. We were a woman family. Grandma, our innocent queen. Mama, the swift knight, fearless warrior. Mama wanted to be princess instead. I know that. Even now, she dreams of taffeta and foot-high tiaras. And myself, I could never decide. So I turned to books, those staunch, upright men. I became scribe, translator of foreign mail, interpreting letters from the government, notices of dissolved marriages and welfare stipulations. I paid the bills, did light man work, fixed faucets, insured everything against all leaks. Before rain, I noticed seagulls. They walk in flocks, cautious across lawns, with splayed toes, indecisive beaks. Grandma says seagulls mean storm. In California, in the summer, Mockingbirds sing all night. Grandma says they are singing for their nesting wives. They don't leave their families borrachando. She likes the ways of birds, respects how they show themselves for toast or a whistle. She believes in myths and birds, and she trusts only what she builds with her own hands. She built her own house, cocky, disheveled carpentry, after living for 25 years with a man who tried to kill her. Grandma, from the hills of Santa Barbara, I would open my eyes to see her stir mush in the morning, her hair in loose braids tucked close around her head with a yellow scarf. And Mama said, it's her own fault getting screwed by a man for that long. Sure as shit wasn't hard. Soft she was, soft. In the night, I would hear it, glass bottles shattering the street, words cracking into shrill screams. Inside my throat, a cold fear as it entered the house in hard, unsteady steps, stopping at my door. My name, bathrobe, slippers. Outside, a 3 a.m. mist, heavy as a breath full of whiskey. Stop it! Go home! Come inside, Mama! If he comes here again, I'll call the police. Inside, a gray kitten, a touchstone purring beneath the quilts Grandma stitched from his suits, the patchwork singing of mockingbirds. You're too soft, always were. You'll get nothing but shit. Baby, don't count on nobody. A mother's wisdom. Soft, I haven't changed. Maybe grown more silent, cynical on the outside. Oh, Mama, with what's inside of me, I could wash that all away. I could. But Mama, if you're good to them, they'll be good to you back. Back. The freeway is across the street. It's summer now, and every night I sleep with a gentle man to the hymn of mockingbirds. And in time, I plant geraniums. I tie up my hair into loose braids, and I trust only what I have built with my own hands. And I'm going to jump ahead now a couple of decades to this book. I only have a couple, looks like one copy left of this book, which is actually 5 books in one. And one of the things that's in here are a couple of poems from a series of poems, long poems that I've been working on now for a number of years, with the title of Ubiquitous Comestibles. That's not the title, but there's a series of poems, one of which is Coffee. I may read from that. The other is Bananas, and I will read that. I also have another one called Oil. As you can imagine, I went from wanting to document my personal history, thinking it was important to document my personal history, and kind of using that as a ladder to get up there to imagination, as Comte once wrote. The true test of morals is imagination. You need to have imagination in order to have empathy. And you need to have empathy in order to have morals. But anyway, to imagine other people's lives. So this is a long poem, Bananas. I wrote this after getting a very strange-looking envelope in the mail from an out-of-work theoretical physicist in Estonia who had gone to England and had discovered my poetry in an anthology and was very excited to be writing to not only a Chicana poet, but a Native American poet. And if those of you remember, when the Soviet Union broke up, Estonia was one of the first 3 countries to declare their independence and their sovereignty the very next morning after the breakup of the Soviet Union. So he writes, and this was just a couple months before that, so he writes me this long letter and he says, well, you know, like Chicanos, he says, you have your own language and you have to write in English, right? You know, you can't really be published, you know, unless you write in English. Well, yeah, you probably can be published, maybe, but, you know, you won't get in the bookstores and you won't sell very many books. And anyway, so he was going on and he was saying, you know, well, you have your own spiritual practices, you have your own history, you have your own culture. He says, well, it's very much the same in Estonia. And so Chicanos and Native Americans seem, you know, seem very similar to us. And I remember thinking that, you know, when I was like 17 years old, you know, I was like devouring this clandestine literature that was coming out of the Soviet Union from Estonia and from the Ural Mountains in particular, you know, and that were written in these languages, you know, preserving their languages and their history and their folklore and everything. And I was thinking, wow, these people are just like Chicanos, you know. So it was great to get this letter. Anyway, he said, well, I got to close for now because I have to take my 5 children on a field trip. We're going to the Dollar Market. The Dollar Market is this place in Estonia where you can find all of the things then you couldn't find normally in the stores there. The only problem was you have to have American dollars to buy anything. So he was telling his children about bananas and how wonderful bananas. He went to England and he went to the market and he bought a banana and how wonderful bananas were. And they didn't believe him that there was such a thing as bananas. He thought that he was exaggerating. So he was taking them to the Dollar Market just to show them bananas. Being an out-of-work theoretical physicist and a poet to boot, he didn't have enough money to buy a single banana. So anyway, I started this long poem to him in 5 sections, kind of for his 5 children. Bananas for Indrek. 1. In Estonia, Indrek is taking his children to the Dollar Market to look at bananas. He wants them to know about the presence of fruit, about globes of light, tart to the tongue, about the twang of tangelos, the cloth of persimmons, the dull little mawns of kiwi. There is not a chance for a taste. Where rubles are scarce, dollars are harder. Even beef is doled out, welfare thin, on Saturday's platter. They light the few candles not reserved for the dead, and try not to think of the small bites in the coming winter, of irradiated fields, or the diminished catch in the fisherman's net. They tell of bananas yellow as daffodils, and mango, which tastes as if the whole world came out from her womb. 2. Colombia, 1928. Bananas rot in the fields. A strip of lost villages between rail yard and cemetery. The United Fruit Company train, a yellow painted slug, eats up the swamps forests and jungle. Campesinos replace Indians who are a dream and a rubble of bloody stones hacked into coffins. Malaria, tuberculosis, cholera, machetes of the jefes, they become like the empty carts that shatter the landscape. Their hands, no longer pulling green teats from the trees, now twist into death, into silence and obedience. They wait in Aracataca, poised as statues between hemispheres. They would rather be tilling their plots for black beans. They would rather grow wings and rise as pericos, parrots, poets, clowns, a word which means all this. Pericos, those messengers from Mitlan, the underworld, where ancestors of the slain arise with the vengeance of Tlaloc. A stench permeates the wind as bananas, black on the stumps, char into odor. The murdered mestizos have long been cleared and begin their new duties as fertilizer for the plantations. Feathers fall over the newly spaded soil, turquoise, scarlet, azure, quetzal, and yellow litters the graves like the gold claws of bananas. 3. Dear I, the 3x6 boxes in front of the hippie market in Boulder are radiant with marigolds, some with heads big as my Indian face. They signify death to me, as it is Labor Day, and already I am making up the guest list for my Dia de los Muertos altar. I'll need maravillas. So this year I plant calendulas for blooming through snow that will fall before November. I am shopping for no-spray bananas. I forego the Dole and Chiquita, that name that always made me blush for being christened with that title. But now I am only a little small, though still brown enough for the "Where you from?" Probably my ancestors planted a placenta here as well as on my Califas coast, where alien shellfish replaced native mussels, clams, and oysters in 1886. I'm from the 21st century, I tell them, and feel rude for it. When all I desire is bananas without pesticides. They're smaller than plantains, which are green outside and firm and golden when sliced. Fried in butter, they turn yellow as overripe fruit and sweet. I ask the produce manager how to crate and pack bananas to Estonia. She glares at me suspiciously. You can't do that. I know. There must be some law. You might spread diseases. They would arrive as much anyway. I am thinking of children in Estonia with no fried plátanos to eat with their fish as the blonde turns away, still without shedding a smile at me. Me, hija del sol, Earth's daughter, lover of bananas. I buy up Baltic wheat. I buy up organic bananas, butter, y canela. I ship banana bread. 5. At Big Mountain, uranium, sings through the dreams of the people. Women dress in glowing cemeteries. Sheep clouds gather below the bluffs. Sundown sandstone blooms in four corners. Smell of sage penetrates as state tractors with chains trawl the resisting plants, gouging anew the tribal borders, uprooting all in their path like Amazonian ants, breaking the hearts of the widows. Elders and children cut the fences again and again as wind whips the waste of ancient rock. Sheep nip across centuries in the people's blood and are carried off by the federal choppers, waiting in the canyon with orders and slings. A long winter, little wool to spin, medicine lost in the desecration of the desert. Old women weep as the camera rolls on the dark side of conquest. Encounter rerun, uranium, 1992. 5. I worry about winter in a place I've never been, about exiles in their homeland gathered around a fire, about the slavery of substance and gruel. Will there be enough to eat? Will there be enough to feed? And they dream of beaches and pies, hemispheres of soft fruit found only in the heat of the planet. Sugarcane seeks out tropics and dictates a resolution to stun the tongues of those who can afford to pay. Imported plums, bullets, black caviar large as peas, smoked meats the color of southern lynchings. What we don't discuss in letters. You are out of work. Not many jobs today for high physicist in Estonia, you say. Poetry, though, is food for the soul. And bread? What is cake before corn and the potato? Before the encounter of animals, women, and wheat? Stocks high these days in survival products. 500 years later, tomato-sized tumors bloom in the necks of the pickers. On my coast, Diablo dominates the golden hills, the fault lines. On ancestral land, Vandenberg shoots nuclear payloads to Kwajalein, a Pacific atoll where 68% of all infants are born, amphibian or anemones. But poetry is for the soul. I speak of spirit, the yellow seed in air, as life is the seed in water, and the poetry of improbability, the magic in the movement of quarks and sunlight, the subtle basketry of hadrons and neutrinos of color. How what you do is what you get. Bananas or worry? What do you say? Your friend, a Chicana poet. Thank you.
Not because of you, Lorna, but tired. Sacramento. When you reach the age of 75, 76, how many of you? 77. Things, things get a little rough. So anyway, I had